You're listening to the Murphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Murphology Podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, this week, meet the guys from ReadyRiders.bike. Mike and Steve recently packed up their bikes and rode the entire Great American Rail Trail. It took them 90 days to pedal over 4,000 miles of mixed terrain surfaces, passing through 14 states as they made their way from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. They are on to tell us about their experiences biking across the country with everything they needed packed on their bikes. And speaking of rails to trails, I interviewed Kevin Belanger, a trail planner for Rails to Trails, back in episode 89 you might want to check out. Kevin's focus is on the Great American Rail Trail Project, which you'll learn is an effort to connect a multi-use trail across the country. So far, they have over half of this complete, over 2,000 miles. And Rails to Trails is a nonprofit organization. You can check out their website at railstotrails.org. And you should also check out the Ready Riders blog at readyriders.bike. If you happen to be listening to this episode in November or December of 2022, you can participate in the Murphology 200-Mile Winter Challenge, especially if you need some inspiration to stay active once cold weather moves in. You can check out the link in the show notes or head on over to the Murphology Podcast website and find the link. In the meantime, here's Mike and Steve. Well, today I'd like to welcome both Mike and Steve to the podcast. Hey, guys.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kathy.
Nice to have you on. And for those of you out there who have never heard of the Great American Rail Trail, that is what we're going to be talking about today. And both Mike and Steve recently tackled the Great American Rail Trail. And I'm pretty excited to hear about it.
Yeah, we picked the route because both Steve and I are in the rail trail, club, if you will. We're members. And, we wanted to spend more time in nature and see how this rail trail is across country. We knew going into it about 52% of it was actually on rail trails. The rest was on, normal roads.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the main attraction there.
And for those of you who don't know what this is, there's a website. It's just called railstotrails.org. And so the vision is a 3,700-mile rail trail that goes across the United States. And like you mentioned, it's not quite complete yet, but I know they have the funding for it. They're heavily promoting that they're getting ready to, secure rails that will become trails. It's a pretty interesting, not to mention that it's all a nonprofit. So pretty cool.
It's also, it meanders through 14 states. And, if what you're trying to do is get across the country quickly, that's probably not the most direct path.
Yeah.
But Mike was our main navigator, but we went mostly along the Great American Rail Trail, and they, have different for in Ohio, we were on the northern part of the state, we were on the southern part of the state.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't direct at all. And people ask us, well, why are you going there? And the only answer we could give is because that's where the next segment is available to us.
Sure. And you're right. I mean, if you wanted to get across the United States as fast as possible, you would probably be in an airplane, a train, a car, those sorts of things. So it is cool to be able to see so much of the countryside. And, I'm a little biased because I live in Iowa and I spend a lot of time on the rail trails in my community. So I'm going to be probably bugging you a little bit about, did you like Iowa? Which I already know you did because I read your blog. But, okay, so back to specifically your route, you went over 4,000 miles. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I computed that we went pretty close to 4,100. Not all of our equipment worked perfectly every day, but I manually kept track of them. And I went back afterwards, and the exact number I came up with, 4,087 miles.
Wow.
Whether that's precise or not, who knows? But, it's pretty close.
And how many days did that take?
Exactly 90 days.
90 days. And did you, when you were planning this trip, did you say, I want to get it done in less than 100 days, or I want to get it done in 90? Like, what was your...
Exactly. It was less than 100 days. I'm sort of fanatical about numbers, and I wanted a 2-digit number, not a 3-digit number.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And, this is the longest we've been away from our wives, and, it didn't want to stretch it too long. As long as we were having fun, that's the main thing.
Yeah. And okay, so you said you're a numbers guy. It sounds like both of you are to some extent. So do you want to share any stats about the trip? Whether it's mileage, we briefly talked about the route. Like, give us the scoop.
I'll let Steve go with that one.
Well, I'll start, and then Mike, you can add to it, I guess. 4,087 miles from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. We actually made it all the way to the ocean, to Rialto Beach. We went the full distance for sure. We climbed 121,122 feet.
Woo!
And I am most proud of that. But anyway, we climbed several mountain passes, but the two highest were, of course, in the Rockies. And the highest one was entering in Yellowstone East Entrance, and we climbed 8,530 feet. That's the Sylvan Pass. And then leaving the Rockies, we climbed a Pipestone Pass, which was 6,453 feet. And for me, the reason I'm most proud of that is because we were fully loaded. We were touring. Now, these were on roads at the time that we made those passings, because that was the only option available.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you're fully loaded, how does that work when you're on some of those trails? I mean, were most of them limestone, or were you like bouncing around on, rugged trails?
Well, for example, in eastern Washington, it was kind of thick gravel. They just sort of poured it on there.
Mm-hmm.
Limestone would be a privilege. There's a lot of areas where it's just, dirt and rocks. And that was an example. Another example was the Cowboy Trail. The gravel was too thick, and so it was put on there by people who don't ride bikes, I guess. There was a lot of resistance on that. I think it'll get better over time, and as they get more and more feedback, hopefully, they'll improve that. But it's almost like if they were to do less and put on less gravel, it would be actually better.
Right.
So yeah, I suppose the biggest frustration on the surface, on the trail surface or whatever, was some places had gravel that was too thick.
Mm-hmm. I have the Cowboy Trail on my list, so it sounds like before I tackle it, I need to find out if the terrain has been changed a little.
Yeah, and you might consider getting 3-inch tires instead of 2-inch tires like we had. 2-inch tires sort of sunk in a little bit more. They were great tires overall, but we wish we had wider tires for that, and the Palouse to Cascade section of eastern Washington.
Going back to some stats, when you're looking at the route, like we said, if you go to the website, you can actually see the route for Rails to Trails. But since it's not all complete, were you planning your route days ahead of time, hours ahead of time, or did you have it set before you guys started?
Well, I had it set. I spent, dozens of hours drawing the map. And if you look at the Rails to Trails, route, there's basically 3 sections: an official trail, and then sort of a recommended route, and those were in red, And when they really didn't have any, they put gray boxes. So there were a lot of gray boxes, and that's where it was entirely left up to, the rider. But
Ah,
I had planned those all ahead of time. And we had some flexibility. We made adjustments, I would say overall, 10 or 15% adjustments, along the way. But I used Ride with GPS to literally draw out the map. And I think one of the main reasons I chose that was the free edition of Ride with GPS lets you draw maps,
oh,
whereas I
okay.
think Strava, you only get the route drawing capability if you pay the lowest tier. I believe at least that's what it was when I started this project.
So you have your route semi predetermined. You know a beginning point and an end point as far as the entire trip because you did Washington D.C. to Washington. But what was a typical day like?
Yeah, so I mean, we would wake up, listening to the birds chirping typically, and just let the light and the birds wake us up, and we would almost immediately have coffee and oatmeal. And the reason we had the oatmeal is because we tried to go to the first restaurant we would find. Sometimes that was a mile away, and sometimes it was 21 miles away.
Sure.
But we would ride. We'd see how we felt. We kind of made a pact that we wouldn't ride in above 95-degree heat. And if we knew the weather report was going to be, hot, which was probably the biggest ongoing battle, we would wake up at, 4:30, 5 o'clock and get on the road, to finish before it got to 95 degrees. So that was, and we would stop along the way. We would, eat lunch almost at restaurants as best we could, and sometimes that was a gas station. And then if we would eat at a restaurant for dinner or a bar, whatever, and oftentimes we'd have a beer at night and sit around camp.
Awesome. And I was just going to ask that. Are you camping most of the time, or are you finding Airbnbs, or using like an app like Warm Showers?
We did warm showers. Yeah, for I think 7 times we slept in people's homes. Sometimes that was just volunteer, but I think there were 4 or 5 official warm showers, visits. But most of the time we were camping. Some of the days were just too darn hot, and we wanted to stay an extra day, or we were in a city, and so those were motel days. 8 days are records.
So that's an awful lot of camping. If you're,
It is.
you're in a Airbnb, I'm sorry, if you're in a warm showers host or a hotel, less than 20 days. So, I mean, that's an awful lot of camping.
We got pretty good at it. We had a drill. Again, we wake up to the sunlight, or first light with the birds would wake us up, and we had a drill. And we kind of had I don't know if it became a pact, but it certainly became a pattern of behavior that we were on the road by 7:30 most mornings. And, we would ride our 50 miles a day, plus or minus a few on most days. And yeah, we stayed in official campsites. I called them government campsites, be they national, state, or regional parks.
Mm-hmm.
But we also stayed in city parks, which was a big surprise to me. And we stayed in RV parks, so we stayed wherever we could. But the city parks, it just surprised me. I'm not used to the idea of rolling into a small town, going and just going down Main Street till you find the main city park, and there would inevitably be a shelter and a drinking fountain and a restroom that was open. And as often as we could, we would call the city clerk and say, "Is it okay?" But after a while, we began to realize, sure, it's okay. Nobody cares,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's okay to camp. And only once in the entire trip of all those 50 or 60 times that we actually camped did we have a sheriff come visit us. And I ended up talking to the guy, and he was polite and kind, and he wasn't worried about us. So Of course, I treated him with respect too because he had the advantage. He could kick me out.
Sure, yes. I have had that
Yeah,
happen before.
that was in Phillipsburg,
In what state?
Montana.
Oh, okay. You mentioned about 95 degrees being kind of your cutoff for cycling. Did you have the other extremes of cold when you were sleeping?
No, not really. One night in Ohio, we had thunder, lightning, and rain, and it got kind of cool, mostly because we got a little bit wet, afterwards. But yeah, no real cold nights.
Nice. And how about, do you guys briefly want to talk about your bikes and your bike setup? I know you said that you're fully contained, but did that mean you were carrying or dragging a trailer or panniers?
Yeah, I'll talk about mine first, and then Steve can talk about his. I am, mechanical engineer by education, so I'm, fanatical about the mechanics of bikes. So I bought a special bike from Priority called the Priority 600,
Oh, yeah.
and it has a nice gearbox where all the gears are in the crank and they're protected against the elements. So I really like that. And it has a belt drive, so it doesn't have a greasy chain that gets worn out. And so that bike did well. It's about $2,500, and it was very, very stock, if you will. I changed the handlebars and put on a little cushion seat post, and then put my racks on, and it was ready to go. But we put on Schwalbe Marathon tires, which Steve and I have had experience with before, and those are 2-inch wide tires, but they're extra durable and extra thick.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't worried about the goat head thorns in the Cowboy Trail that everyone warned us about. So we only had one flat, and I got that outside of Shoshone, Wyoming. Murphy's Law, when I bunked on mile 98 out of 100 and walked into Shoshone with Steve's help. And that city park he talked about, we thought there was a motel in that park, but a motel in that city, but there wasn't, or town. And it turned out we stayed at that city park. And the funny thing is, the next morning, we got woken up by the sprinklers. I think that happened to us twice or maybe 3 times. But it's both funny and annoying. Certainly funnier now, to think about that. But yeah, the city parks were a surprise to me as well. Anyways, I digress. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, we certainly got good at looking at the water patterns of the grass and where we're the sprinklers to come on. So yeah, we both were having a quad set of panniers and a handlebar bag, front and rear racks. We didn't have trailers. That worked very well for us. A pretty well balanced bike. I didn't get a single flat traveling across the entire country. So I'm just amazed. And if that is a advertisement for Schwalbe Marathon, E+ tires, then I don't know what is.
Right, especially since you look at all the different types of terrain. I mean, the gravel you experience, but also just road traffic. There's so many nails and glass and just there's so much junk that those tires are amazing.
Yeah, to be sorry to digress here, but I have a theory that actually, highways and roads with all the trash on the side or whatever is more dangerous than the dirt and gravel and rocky trails, because that's the sharp stuff. I mean, a metal staple is what popped my tire in Shoshone, Wyoming.
Interesting. And I want to go back to that Priority bike. I'm assuming since you do a lot of touring that you follow Ryan Van Duzer.
Yeah, that was, I just didn't spend the extra. He has the 600X, which he helped design.
Yeah.
And that would be nice. And we did meet one guy that did have one of those bikes, but I didn't really need that. And it was an extra $1,000, and I'm cheapskate in some regards. So I didn't get the deluxe model.
Sure, but he's been on the podcast a couple times, so if you're curious about that bike, you can go over to Doozer TV. He's got all kinds of videos about the Priority bike, and that not having a chain on your bike just seems really it's hard to wrap my head around that. But yet, after watching his videos and seeing how cool that system is, it's definitely something I would like on a bike in the future.
Yeah.
I was just judging from how it behaved, the maintenance and what have you, that Mike didn't have to perform. I don't know that I'll ever get another touring bike because I'm pretty happy with my rig as it is, but I would get a belt-driven rig, just the reliability and maintenance freeness of it. Very, very good. I had midway I needed to buy a new chain, and I needed some new brake pads and what have you, but that's just standard maintenance. We pulled into a bike shop.
Well, that's actually can segue to one of my questions I wanted to ask you about mishaps, whether it's weather, wildlife, or mechanicals.
Oh yeah, we had it all. Weather, I suppose the two most memorable things were in Ohio. We were sleeping in Tim's Tim's backyard. He had a vacant lot next to him, and he let us swim in his pond or whatever. And somebody visiting him mentioned that there was a storm report that night, but we couldn't find anything in our weather forecast. But I'll be darned if it didn't have severe thunder, lightning, and probably 60-mile-an-hour winds we saw in the reports. And when you're in a tent, that's like being on the inside of a drum during a concert. It just amplifies everything. And there was a fire next door, and it started by lightning and a transformer, I think. So that was severe. But we had 3 days of sort of down trees blocking the trails, after that storm, until we finally essentially rode out of that storm, if you will, in terms of the damage after the storm. The second time, at least in my head, was the 20 minutes of hail that we got out of Johnstown, Nebraska. That was a tingly feeling, as hail is, but we just made the best of it. And when we got to Johnstown, there's one bar that was the restaurant, and we just sort of dried out in there for a few hours. And those were the worst weather events. We had wildlife-wise, a raccoon ate my platypus bag, which was my own stupid mistake. I didn't know they eat plastic like that, but they did. We came kind of close to the bison in Yellowstone, but not on purpose.
Right.
But that was, tried to put a car between us and feel safer that way. But let's see, other wildlife. Yeah, I got chased really by 2 or 3 dogs in Beverly, Washington. Yeah. And I wasn't ready for it, and I was kind of tired, but boy, that woke me up, and hustled away from them. And that was probably the worst dog episode.
So I did well to let, Mike would generally be 50 yards ahead of me or just he's a little bit stronger rider. On some days that would grow, but on that particular day, he was maybe 50 yards ahead of me. So I let the dogs chase him. And then by the time I came through the same area, they were tired out and didn't want to have anything to do with me.
I had a similar situation when we were riding across the country. We were down in New Mexico, and it was a pack of dogs. And I was kind of in the middle of, there were 3 of us cycling, and the person in the back was all like, dogs, dogs, dogs. And we look back, and they were actually Chihuahuas. So we first, you went from terror to like a pack of dogs. Oh my gosh. And then we could not stop laughing. So, and then I was so nervous that the little guys were going to get, hit by a car. I was like, I want you guys to be strong, and, you can be a pack, but go back. And then I wanted to touch base with, the down trees. It's one thing, to see a down tree on a trail or on a road, but when you have all your panniers on and all that weight on your bike, a down tree like is a huge game changer in my opinion.
Yeah, that was in Ohio, and we lifted, we bushwhacked our way through a lot of times, breaking branches. It dawned on us after a dozen or two of those that, hey, there could be poison ivy. We're used to poison oak in the West, but on these trees, but it never happened. So that was, I'm thankful for that. One of the nights, we stealth camped, or whatever you want to call it, about 6 times. And one of the first time, I think, was sort of between 2 down trees right on the trail, because we knew no one was coming through there, and there were no campgrounds around that area. So it actually worked to our advantage, I guess, one day at least.
All the motels were closed because they did not have power.
Oh, yeah.
Power was out for 3 days in that neck of the woods. And so anyway, yeah, stealth camping worked out just great. We were self-contained, so we had everything we needed to just park between 2 trailheads, between 2 down trees.
Yeah. How about a few, like, I don't know, favorite places, favorite states, favorite towns? I'm sure you have plenty of favorites.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the friendly people, the people overall when you're touring, that I think that a lot of people would say that it is the most fun, meeting all the people and hearing the stories and telling your own stories, etc. of the Midwest. In terms of riding, I like the Hiawatha Trail, which of course, you pay $18, but it's kind of worth it because it's just so beautiful going through the forest there, and being at the treetops there on those trestle bridges, etc. I really love the mountains and the tunnels and the rivers all sort of coming together in the Cascades. In Washington, I guess in the western, portion of Washington state. So that was, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
There kind of are 2 halves to Washington, and the Columbia River divides those 2 halves. The eastern half is very dry and very hot, and from a trail perspective, the trail is not nearly as nice. But once you get west of the Columbia River and you climb a particular pass over an army base and go through a couple cool bridges, whatever, then all of a sudden you're coming down into some really lush territory, and that's what the Cascades, and that's what Mike's talking about, and that indeed was beautiful. I liked Yellowstone. I've been to Yellowstone once when I was a young man traveling across the country in a VW bus, but it was different. It was definitely, I saw more of it on a bike. I could take my time. We definitely, when you're in a car, you're just basically fighting traffic. You're trying to find a place to park. You're trying to, and if you need to eat, it turns into a parking job more than an eating job. So when you're on a bike, you can just roll up wherever you want to be. And we took we went to the waterfalls, and we went to geysers and just all sorts of stuff in Yellowstone that I never saw before because, we gave up when we were in a car. The Olympic Peninsula is very beautiful. It's a lot like the Cascades. It's a rainforest, and it's different, but it's green, and there's the trails are lovely. Everybody should do that at least once. But I think the thing that was most eye-opening, enjoyable for me on the whole trip was just the small towns in Iowa and Nebraska and elsewhere. But the city parks and the meeting the people who were engaged us, and people were not afraid of us. People were happy to. We were something new for them, and we got to learn a little bit more about, the small town nature, and I just loved it. And my best buddy here, Mike, has the gift of gab, and he would engage these people, and I would come along for the ride, and all of a sudden we were just laughing and yucking it up and having a good old talking to people.
I love it. And I have to ask, I live right on the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, which is a north-south trail in central Iowa. I assume that you went on that, but do you have any good memories about Iowa?
Oh, yeah. I call Iowa, in other words, amazing, instead of the other derogatory one.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we met, Team Love Shack, a RAGBRAI team
Yeah.
of big party group, and their hippie bus, their party bus, and that was very fun. I remember meeting Nicole, I think, as we rode into town, and she met us on the trail and rode along with us, and offered her help, and gave a recommendation of where to eat lunch in Cedar Rapids. And we had a good time there in Iowa.
Excellent.
We also stayed at our first warm showers in Cedar Rapids, or just outside of it.
Yeah, Waterloo. Yeah.
And the trail is just beautiful. It's a beautiful trail, and it's one of the best, and in the whole country. I mean, there's plenty of very nice ones, but it certainly was up there. We certainly had a great day riding as we approached and then left Cedar Rapids. There's a park downtown that has all sorts of meandering rail trails. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Okay, so you finished this epic trip, and I know that you've done many other long endurance touring trips, but this one specifically, your 90 days of all you do is ride your bike, set up camp, eat, sleep, repeat. How did you have any struggles with transitioning back to, I'm going to put it in quotes, but like normal life?
Yeah, my wife's friend said, "Well, Mike's going to be a little feral when he comes home, so you might want to have him camp in the backyard," in reference to cats that are feral. But no, it was when you travel and you rough it basically for 90 days, you take things for granted. So it was actually all this welcome stuff, like not having to set up and tear down the tent, and having 2-ply toilet paper and
Right.
everything right at your fingertips. So no, it was pretty easy.
I agree with that. Frankly, I was looking forward to getting home. I love my wife. I love my home. So, but the comforts of home certainly are comfortable. So it was not difficult to transition. I wouldn't leave that as a reason not to go on a bicycle tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And I already said this a second ago, but I don't know if it's both of you together, but I know at least Mike has been long distance touring for a very, very long time. I mean, as in, at least 10 years. But what is it about it that's so appealing?
Something different every day, and then surviving on your skills, I guess. Everything from talking with people to navigating to hoofing it up the hill or whatever. So I like that aspect of it. But if I had to boil it to one sentence, it's something different and new each day.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Steve?
Mike plans to be spontaneous, and this bicycle touring ensures that he can be spontaneous every day. For me, rising and sleeping with the sun is very calming. Riding many hours every day, getting the exercise is very calming. I love the fact that you can eat with impunity and have as much ice cream as you want.
Yes.
2 ice creams in 2 different cities if you want. I was reading Adventure Cycling. In the most recent edition, there's a woman who has diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, Helena Kotala, and she quotes many benefits of cycling. She talks about endorphins and stress, optic flow, the idea of stuff just passing by you as you ride, calms nerves that make your nerves that makes you stressed out or whatever, and just the idea of stuff going by you at the rate that it goes by you as you're riding a bicycle. And I really related to an awful lot of the things that she said. I don't know about the science. I'm not a health sciences person by any means. All I know is that I'm really happy when I ride my bike. And riding my bike for 90 days, I'm pretty happy right now. I'm still happy. I'm still enjoying it.
The residual effects of that ride have continued, right? And I don't even know if we said this in the beginning, but this is an event that you guys basically just completed this last month, right?
Yeah, September 3rd, I think. It was basically June 3rd to September 3rd of 2022.
Okay, okay. You've been on, I don't know. Well, let me ask. How many tours have you guys been on together?
Probably about 8 or so. Some of them are just 2 nights and some are 22 nights. But Steve, you go through, you probably have a better memory of the list than I do.
I don't have the list in front of me, but we started probably in 2007 or so riding. So it'd be safe to say we've been doing it for 15 years together. Now, Mike did a tour of Europe when he was college age. So if you want to count that in, then we're talking 40 some years, I imagine.
Right, right.
But together we call ourselves the Ready Riders. We've done, I would say, probably a dozen tours if you want to count the 1 and 2 day tours and the week-long tours, and some of them were pretty significant. Prior to this, the longest that we had done was Seattle to San Francisco. Did the Natchez Trace. We had done the Erie Canal. We've done the Cascades tour, and then we had a few down the Pacific coast. Mike has done a few with a few other buddies. One summer when I was laid up for a medical reason, he did a 3-week tour with some other buddies also. And so I would, 8, 10, 12, I can't remember right now.
Yeah, but significant amount of traveling together, and at least based on this podcast, you're still friends.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have different styles. I tend to shoot from the hip and, make things up as I go along. And Steve's more of a planner, but together, it balances out, I'd say.
Sure. So do you have another tour in mind for the future?
Not really. We've talked about it possibly, but, RAGBRAI seems fun. We met a lot of RAGBRAI riders, and that's a week. And, my wife and I talked, and, the limit's about 3 weeks in terms of, what is much harder after that. Also, I asked a buddy who did the Great Divide, what's the juiciest part of the Great Divide mountain bike ride? He said Colorado, probably. He said Montana was too much hike-a-bike, relatively speaking. So that's on my radar. But yeah, nothing planned on the calendar yet.
I would like to get familiar with the Adventure Cycling Group. They've got a lot of tours that they recommend, and a lot of them are probably a week or two or something. I think that I will probably, I don't need to do 3 months anytime soon again. That was epic. But to me, the perfect duration would be 2 or 3 weeks, I think. 1 week is not enough, I think, because as easy as it is, you just don't get into the flow. You don't get into the groove.
Sure. Yep.
In a week, and then it's over. So, this is one of the things about this Great American Tour that we did, is that we were in a flow. We had the drill down. We were laughing, and we, each day it wasn't formidable. It was comfortable, and that's because we were in a total groove.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that. And I don't think you can do that in 1 week. I can't. Let me just say, I can't do that in 1 week. I need a couple of 3 weeks in order to get in that groove. So I'm gonna look for tours that are a couple of 3 weeks, I think.
We did the Southern tier when we went across America, and it took 65 days. And I can completely agree with you. Once you get in that groove, it is just like everything works like clockwork. Everyone has their little jobs, even though we don't really say it out loud. But for me, probably day 56, 57, I was ready to be done. So I don't know about doing a 90-day trip, but man, experiencing the Great American Rail Trail is going to be, I want to experience more of it.
We specifically took east to west for a couple reasons. We wanted to, quote, I wanted to come home, in the direction of west. Is the the direction the country was developed and populated,
Mm-hmm.
and but more importantly, logistically, it let us practice on the relatively easy stuff in the East. The CNO, Chesapeake and Ohio, that
Mm-hmm.
we started with out of Washington D.C., and the Great Allegheny Passage, the Gap for short. Those were very easy, compared to Wyoming and Montana, both in hills and just developments and campgrounds along the way. So that was the reason we went east to west.
I totally, it was easy to get in the groove on the Gap and the CNO. And, when those ended in Pittsburgh, then we kind of had to begin to, that took us 8 or 10 days, I think, when we got to Pittsburgh. And then all of a sudden it was a little different nature. We had to get into the groove of figuring, a little more figuring out.
Mm-hmm.
But the physical and the packing and just the daily routine, we had that part down, and we were ready to take on what turned out to be a little bit more challenges of just sort of the next level of figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't as easy once we got off those two trails. But that was a great conditioning, and going, everybody had told us, going east to west, oh, you're going against the prevailing winds. Well, I don't think winds were ever a serious factor in the entire trip. We had side winds, and sure, on a few days, it didn't matter which direction we were heading at the moment. You'd always encounter some sort of a headwind.
Right.
At some point in your ride, you're gonna have a headwind, but there was never the just never-ending heavy headwinds that caused us to get discouraged. We didn't have that problem. We went east to west, so.
Well, I do know one thing that's pretty cool is that you documented this adventure via blog. Do you want to share with people how they can read up?
Yeah, we bought a domain name, or I bought a domain name called readyriders.bike. Right now, it, redirects, to a WordPress site. But it originally started out as a selfish thing. I wanted to write a story every day so we'd remember what we did, so when we're old and bedridden, we can read about how fun things were when we were younger, that sort of thing. But just document the people, that we met and the stories. So yeah, it turned out that a lot of our friends and family, followed it daily and just drank their cup of coffee in the morning because it would just arrive in their email inbox. And I tried to keep it short. People would give me a hard time because I would try to keep it between 200 and 300 words, and at least 4 pictures. And that was a challenge at times, but it was frankly a lot easier, in 2022 than it was in 2012, whatever, when I think I did my first, blog. But I find it fresh in your mind. I would do it. I'd write usually and publish it in the morning about the previous day. So just because I'm a morning person, and also it gave a chance for the previous day to solidify in my brain and the memory and put things in perspective. But doing it every day was, I think, good because it's all, fresh in your mind, and you're not, recalling it from weeks ago.
Yeah, I also did the same thing when we went across the United States, and I just, kept a constant note for each day of how many miles and fun things we saw and maybe feelings I had. And it's interesting to look back at it and you're like, oh, I've totally forgot we were here or we went to this place.
Yeah, they're the only the restrictions sometimes is we had stories we really couldn't tell because they're too controversial in the blog, but that's I think understandable.
Okay, so if people just Google Ready Riders, they should be able to find that WordPress blog, right?
Yeah, readyriders.bike is the URL. A few years ago, they have all these different domain endings, like, not just .com and .org, but .bike. So we decided to do that, readyriders.bike.
Love it. Well, Mike and Steve, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And I look forward to checking out that blog for future adventures as well.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you,
Hey,
Kathy.
thank you so much for having us. I enjoyed clicking around on Morphology.
Oh, cool.
And I think I happened to have clicked on that day that you were describing, somewhere 50 something out of 60 something. You were talking to a friend, or you were on somebody else's podcast, I think. And,
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to the interaction there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. Take care. Bye bye.
Well, that's it for this week. A few great deals to send your way. Use code Murphology at hammerhead.io to get a free heart rate monitor with your crew, too. And a shout out to Lily Trotter's compression socks. Use code Murphology to get 20% off your purchase of the best compression socks. Also use code Primal Murph for 20% off your Primal Wear cycling gear at primalwear.com. Of course, email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/murphology and visit my Facebook, Instagram, and website for daily entertainment. I have more great episodes in the pipeline, so I hope you continue to be a Murphology podcast listener.